June 19, 1944, Philippine Sea, 150 miles west of Guam. Vice Admiral Raymond Spruance's Task Force 58 cuts through Pacific swells as radar operators aboard 15 American carriers track massive enemy formations approaching from the west. At 10:23 a.m., Admiral Mark Mitcher orders his task force to turn into the wind. Combat information centers across the fleet buzz with urgent activity as 430 Japanese aircraft bear down on the most powerful naval aviation force ever assembled. In ready rooms throughout the American fleet, Navy pilots receive final briefings before strapping themselves into Grumman F6F Hellcats. Their Pratt Whitney R2 1800 engines warm up with throaty roars that echo across flight decks stretching to the horizon. These pilots know they're about to participate in what will become the largest carrier-to-carrier engagement in history, but none can imagine the devastating results awaiting Japanese aviation. Today, Leroy Grumman's revolutionary fighter design will face its ultimate test against Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's mobile fleet in the most one-sided aerial massacre of World War II. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot is about to begin, and American industrial might will demonstrate its supremacy over traditional military courage in a battle that will effectively end Japanese carrier aviation forever. The story begins not in the blazing skies above the Pacific, but in the modest circumstances of a shy engineer from Huntington, Long Island, named Leroy Randall Grumman, born January 4, 1895. Grumman started as a Navy flight instructor and test pilot, but when corporate mergers threatened his career during the Great Depression in 1929, this quiet innovator would risk everything to create something that would transform naval aviation forever. Observing American pilots struggling against Japan's superior Mitsubishi A6M0 fighter throughout 1942 and early 1943, Grumman designed a robust carrier fighter with overwhelming firepower and unprecedented pilot protection, a concept so revolutionary that his F6F Hellcat would achieve a 19-to-1 kill ratio that remains unmatched in aviation history. His simple design philosophy, emphasizing reliability over complexity, would be studied and copied by aircraft manufacturers worldwide, but it was his unwavering commitment to pilot survivability that would capture the U.S. Navy's attention and fundamentally change the course of the Pacific War. During the late 1920s, the American aviation industry faced dramatic consolidation as Wall Street financiers and banking firms acquired small aircraft companies and merged them into larger corporations, seeking to dominate what they believed would become a rapidly expanding market. The Loaning Aeronautical Engineering Corporation, where Grumman worked as a test pilot and production supervisor, had been purchased by the banking firm Hayden, Stone and Company, which intended to merge it with the Keystone Aircraft Corporation in a grand consolidation scheme. In 1929, facing unemployment rather than relocate to Keystone's Pennsylvania facility, Leroy Grumman made a desperate decision that would change military aviation history. He mortgaged his modest Huntington home for $16,950, his entire life savings, and joined fellow loaning employees Jake Swerbel and William Schwendler in founding their own company. With Swerbel's mother courageously borrowing an additional $6,000 from her employers, they established Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation in an abandoned automobile garage in Baldwin, Long Island, officially opening on January 2, 1930. The timing couldn't have been worse for starting any business, let alone one dependent on government contracts. The stock market had crashed just months earlier, on Black Tuesday, October 29, 1929, and America was sliding into the Great Depression that would eventually see unemployment reach 25%. While established corporations with decades of experience were failing throughout the country, this tiny startup survived month to month by welding aluminum tubing for truck frames and repairing damaged aircraft belonging to other companies. But Leroy Grumman possessed something that many larger competitors lacked, an intimate understanding of what naval aviators actually needed rather than what engineering theory suggested they should have. His breakthrough came when a Navy admiral casually mentioned at a Washington meeting that anyone who could develop practical retractable landing gear for naval aircraft might make a fortune. Most aircraft manufacturers dismissed the suggestion as impractical, but Grumman saw opportunity where others saw obstacles. Working in the cramped garage with limited tools and even more limited capital, Grumman designed collapsible floats with retractable landing gear that solved multiple problems simultaneously. The innovation launched the company into military contracts, leading directly to the revolutionary FF-1 fighter in 1931, the first carrier-based aircraft with retractable landing gear capable of exceeding 200 miles per hour. By 1940, Grumman had established himself as the Navy's premier fighter manufacturer with the 4F Wildcat, but disturbing reports from the Pacific revealed a catastrophic truth. American pilots were being systematically slaughtered by Japan's superior Mitsubishi A6M0 fighter. The Wildcat was honest and reliable, representing solid American engineering, but it couldn't match the Zero's remarkable combination of speed, maneuverability, climbing ability, and operational range. Japanese Admiral Nagumo allegedly described the American fighter with contempt as obese, like an old sumo wrestler, a description that stung because it contained uncomfortable elements of truth. In June 1941, recognizing that the Vought 4U Corsair's development was facing serious delays and technical problems, the Navy asked Grumman to develop an improved Wildcat replacement as insurance against potential program failures. But Grumman understood that incremental improvements to existing designs wouldn't suffice against Japanese opposition. American pilots desperately needed a completely new fighter that could outfight the Zero in every category except perhaps turning radius at low speeds, and even that disadvantage could be overcome through superior tactics and firepower. Working closely with his most trusted engineers, chief designer William Schwendler and factory manager Jake Swerble Grumman, laid out ambitious specifications for a much larger, more powerful aircraft than anything his company had previously attempted. Where typical contemporary fighters had wings averaging 250 square feet, the new design featured massive 334 square foot wings that could fold completely flat against the fuselage for maximum carrier storage efficiency. The initial XF6F1 prototype, powered by a 1,600 horsepower Wright R2600 Cyclone engine, first flew on June 26, 1942, just 20 days after the decisive Battle of Midway had demonstrated the critical importance of superior carrier aviation. But Lieutenant Commander Edward "Butch" O'Hare, the Navy's first ace and already a national hero for his defense of the carrier Lexington, visited Grumman's Bethpage facility in April 1942 to provide crucial combat intelligence about Japanese fighter capabilities and American tactical deficiencies. Based on O'Hare's detailed recommendations and additional input from other combat veterans, Grumman made the momentous decision to install the much more powerful 2,000 horsepower Pratt Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, the same advanced power plant used in the troubled Corsair and the Army's P-47 Thunderbolt. This engine change required extensive redesign of the aircraft's structure, cooling systems, and propeller installation. But it transformed the fighter's performance characteristics completely. The redesignated XF6F3 flew on July 30, 1942, demonstrating performance capabilities that exceeded all expectations and convinced Navy officials that they possessed a potential war winner. The service immediately ordered mass production before extensive testing had been completed, an unprecedented decision that reflected both confidence in Grumman's engineering and desperation to field superior fighters as quickly as possible. Grumman's design philosophy emphasized practical simplicity and rapid mass production over theoretical perfection. He insisted on straight lines and uncomplicated shapes that could be manufactured efficiently by relatively inexperienced workers, recognizing that wartime production would require enormous expansion of the workforce. The company's engineering motto became, "Make it simple, make it strong, make it work," principles that would prove crucial as production demands skyrocketed. The F6F featured numerous innovations that would define American fighter design for years: hydraulically operated flaps, wing folding mechanisms, and gun reloading systems, electrically driven landing hooks and tail wheels, and most importantly, 212 pounds of cockpit armor with bullet-resistant windshields protecting pilots from enemy fire. The aircraft mounted 6 50-caliber Browning machine guns with 400 rounds per gun, delivering devastating firepower that could destroy enemy aircraft with short, precisely aimed bursts. By January 1943, Fighting Squadron 9 received the first operational Hellcats aboard USS Essex, beginning the transition from the outmatched Wildcat to what pilots would soon call the Ace Maker. production accelerated rapidly at the new Bethpage Plant No. 3, where workers manufactured aircraft while portions of the factory were still under construction, a testament to both wartime urgency and Grumman's organizational efficiency. American carrier air groups underwent complete reorganization around the Hellcats' revolutionary capabilities throughout 1943 and early 1944. Fighter squadrons typically operated 36 F6Fs per carrier, with experienced pilots undergoing intensive training on the aircraft's unique characteristics and combat potential. The Hellcat was significantly heavier and more powerful than the Zero, but its combat tactics emphasized completely different strengths: high-speed diving attacks, superior high-altitude performance, and coordinated team fighting rather than traditional one-on-one dogfighting. Navy pilots quickly discovered the Hellcat's remarkably forgiving flight characteristics made it ideal for the demanding requirements of carrier operations. Unlike the temperamental Corsair, which remained problematic for carrier landings until late 1944 due to its long nose and difficult approach angles, the F6F could be safely operated by pilots with relatively minimal training. Grumman's design philosophy consistently prioritized pilot survival and operational reliability over absolute performance specifications, creating an aircraft that could absorb tremendous battle damage and still return pilots safely to their carriers. The Hellcat's first combat deployment came on August 31, 1943, when Fighting Squadron 5, operating from USS Yorktown, participated in the Marcus Island raid. American pilots immediately recognized their aircraft's dramatic superiority over Japanese fighters, achieving favorable kill ratios from their very first encounters with enemy aviation. The psychological impact was enormous. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, American pilots felt confident rather than desperate when facing Japanese opposition. Throughout late 1943 and early 1944, Hellcat squadrons systematically replaced Wildcat units across the Pacific Fleet. Pilots transitioning from the 4F marveled at the F6F's incredible climbing ability, devastating firepower, and remarkable structural strength. The aircraft could dive at speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour without structural failure, giving American pilots tremendous tactical advantages in hit-and-run attacks against Japanese formations that had been optimized for slower, more maneuverable combat. American naval aviation developed increasingly sophisticated tactics around the Hellcat's capabilities. The thatch weave, perfected during Wildcat operations, was refined for higher speed engagements, while new formations took advantage of the F6F's superior climbing performance and firepower concentration. Radar-directed combat air patrols became standard practice, with multiple fighter divisions coordinated from combat information centers aboard carriers. By June 1944, Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher's Task Force 58 had assembled the most powerful naval aviation force in history. 15 fleet carriers and light carriers embarked over 900 aircraft, including 475 F6F Hellcats. This massive concentration of air power represented American industrial capacity, translated directly into tactical superiority. Superbly trained pilots flying technologically superior aircraft manufactured in unprecedented quantities and supported by the world's most advanced logistics system. The numerical advantage was overwhelming, but equally important was the qualitative superiority American pilots enjoyed. While Japanese training programs struggled to replace experienced aviators lost during 2 years of intensive combat, American flight schools were producing thousands of well-trained pilots using standardized curricula and unlimited fuel for training flights. The average American Hellcat pilot reached combat squadrons with significantly more flying experience than his Japanese counterpart. Mitcher's aviators had been perfecting coordinated fighter tactics throughout the island-hopping campaign. Combat air patrol procedures, radar-directed intercepts, and multi-squadron attacks had been tested and refined in dozens of operations from Tarawa to Truk. Fighter direction officers aboard each carrier could coordinate multiple intercepts simultaneously, directing Hellcats to optimal attack positions based on radar information unavailable to Japanese defenders. The stage was set for the decisive confrontation that Japanese naval planners had been desperately seeking since their defeat at Midway 2 years earlier. Operation Ago represented Japan's last chance to destroy American carrier aviation before the homeland itself came under direct attack. On the morning of June 19, 1944, Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's mobile fleet launched the first of 4 massive coordinated raids against Task Force 58, initiating what would become the most decisive naval air battle in history. Radio intercepts and long-range radar contacts had revealed Japanese intentions hours before the attacks materialized, giving American defenders crucial preparation time that Japanese planners had not anticipated. At 10:23 a.m., radar operators aboard multiple carriers detected the first wave of 68 Japanese aircraft approaching from 150 miles away. Admiral Mitcher immediately ordered his task force to turn into the wind and launched every available Hellcat, deploying them in carefully planned layered defensive formations at altitudes ranging from 15,000 to 25,000 feet. The American pilots had 30 crucial minutes before the Japanese reached effective attack range, more than enough time for properly coordinated interceptions using proven tactics. Lieutenant Junior Grade Alexander Vraciu, flying from USS Lexington with Fighting Squadron 16, was initially frustrated when his F6F supercharger malfunctioned, limiting his climbing performance. But as his squadron mates pulled ahead to intercept the incoming formation, Vraciu received vectors to a group of Japanese dive bombers that had broken through the initial defensive screen. What followed became one of the most remarkable individual performances in aviation history. Diving on a formation of Yokosuka D-4Y Judy dive bombers, Vraciu demonstrated the deadly effectiveness of both his aircraft and his training. In exactly 8 minutes of precision flying and gunnery, he shot down 6 Japanese aircraft using only 360 rounds of ammunition, an average of 60 rounds per kill, that represented marksmanship bordering on the theoretically perfect. The F6F's 650 caliber machine guns could literally shred Japanese aircraft with short, concentrated bursts. The unarmored fuel tanks of Zero fighters ignited instantly when hit by American armor-piercing incendiary rounds, while the fragile construction of Judy dive bombers and Jill torpedo bombers made them catastrophically vulnerable to even glancing strikes from the Hellcats' heavy ammunition. Commander Charles Brewer's VF-15 from USS Essex provided another stunning demonstration of American technological superiority when they intercepted the leading Japanese formation with only 8 Hellcats against 47 enemy aircraft. Despite overwhelming numerical odds that should have guaranteed Japanese success, Brewer and Ensign Richard Fowler each shot down 4 aircraft in the opening minutes of combat. The mathematical impossibility of such results could only be explained by the enormous technological advantages American pilots enjoyed. Across the entire battle area, similar scenes of systematic destruction repeated as wave after wave of Japanese attacks dissolved under concentrated Hellcat interceptions. The F6F's superior speed, climbing ability, and structural strength allowed American pilots to attack repeatedly from advantageous positions, make their kills with devastating efficiency, and escape before Japanese fighters could respond effectively. Combat became not a contest between equals, but a methodical destruction of Japanese aviation by technologically superior opponents. Japanese pilots who had dominated Pacific skies for 2.5 years found themselves helplessly outmatched by the combination of American technology, training, and industrial capacity. Their aircraft, optimized for the early war period when fuel economy and maneuverability were paramount, simply could not compete against the raw power and firepower that American industry had created. By nightfall on June 19, 1944, American pilots had shot down approximately 300 Japanese aircraft while losing only 23 Hellcats in air-to-air combat. The kill ratio approached an unprecedented 13-1, representing a level of aerial dominance that seemed impossible to pre-war observers. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot had lived up to its name. Japanese aviation had been systematically slaughtered with clinical efficiency. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot demonstrated the F6F's superiority across multiple tactical scenarios that extended far beyond basic air-to-air combat capabilities. Commander David McCampbell, flying from USS Essex, would later achieve even more spectacular individual results on October 24, 1944, during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. In what became the most successful single-day performance by any American fighter pilot, McCampbell shot down 9 Japanese aircraft in a single mission while flying an F6F Hellcat, bringing his total score to 34 kills and making him the Navy's highest-scoring ace. For his extraordinary achievements, McCampbell received the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration. McCampbell's achievement revealed another crucial aspect of the Hellcat's design excellence that separated it from earlier fighters. The aircraft's exceptional fuel capacity and remarkable structural strength allowed extended combat missions that would have been physically impossible in previous generation fighters. McCampbell remained airborne for hours during the Leyte Gulf engagement, engaging multiple enemy formations across vast distances and returning safely to his carrier despite complete ammunition depletion and critically low fuel levels. Night fighting variants of the Hellcat extended American dominance into after-dark operations, where Japanese forces had previously enjoyed tactical advantages. The F6F-3N and F6-5N night fighters, equipped with sophisticated APS-6 radar systems mounted in wing pods, could locate and destroy Japanese aircraft, attempting nocturnal attacks on American task forces. These specialized variants claimed their first victories in November 1943 and continued operating successfully until the war's end, demonstrating the basic airframe's adaptability to evolving tactical requirements. Production statistics revealed the true magnitude of the industrial miracle behind American aerial supremacy. By March 1944, Grumman's Bethpage facility was manufacturing one complete Hellcat every hour around the clock, achieving a monthly production record of 644 aircraft that has never been equaled in aviation history. This represented not just quantitative superiority, but a fundamental transformation in how military aircraft could be manufactured using mass production techniques pioneered in American automobile factories. The 10,000th Hellcat was delivered to the Navy in March 1945, and final production totaled 12,275 aircraft by November 1945, when the war ended and contracts were cancelled. To put this achievement in perspective, Grumman alone manufactured more fighter aircraft than the entire German aviation industry produced during the same period, despite Germany's reputation for industrial efficiency. British Royal Navy pilots, operating 1,263 F6Fs, received under Lend-Lease arrangements, achieved additional confirmation of the aircraft's superiority in different theatres and tactical situations. Though facing fewer opportunities for air-to-air combat than their Pacific counterparts due to the different nature of European and Mediterranean operations, British Hellcat pilots claimed 52 enemy aircraft during operations against German forces. These victories included successful attacks on the heavily defended German battleship Tirpitz during operations in Norwegian fjords, where Hellcats provided fighter escort for Fleet Air Arm Barracuda dive bombers. The aircraft's structural strength and pilot protection systems proved equally valuable in the challenging weather and operational conditions of the Arctic theatre. The aircraft's legendary reliability statistics demonstrated Grumman's engineering excellence in ways that extended far beyond pure performance specifications. Hellcats maintained an extraordinary 95% mission-ready rate throughout the war, meaning they were available for combat operations 95% of the time. Contemporary fighters, including the vaunted German Messerschmitt Bf 109 and Focke-Wulf Flu 190, typically achieved only 75 to 80% availability rates under combat conditions, giving American carriers tremendous operational advantages in sustained combat operations. This reliability translated directly into tactical advantages that multiplied American numerical superiority. Carriers could consistently launch full air groups with confidence that mechanical failures would be minimal, while enemy forces had to account for significant numbers of aircraft being unavailable due to maintenance requirements or parts shortages. The Hellcat's devastating success fundamentally transformed naval aviation doctrine and influenced fighter aircraft design principles worldwide for decades to come. American carrier task forces could now launch aggressive offensive operations with unprecedented confidence in mission success, knowing their fighters possessed overwhelming advantages over any enemy aircraft they might encounter. This technological superiority enabled strategic bombing campaigns against Japanese home islands that would have been suicidal with earlier generation fighters providing escort and protection. Japanese military analysts studied American fighter tactics with growing alarm and desperation as the war progressed. Captured documents reveal their increasingly pessimistic assessment that American pilots always employed heavy bombardment before attacking, making their tactical movements predictable, but acknowledged that coordinated Hellcat attacks inflicted extremely costly and unsustainable casualties on Japanese forces attempting any form of counterattack. The psychological impact on Japanese pilots proved even more devastating than the material losses, though both were catastrophic. Veteran aviators who had dominated the early Pacific War found themselves flying increasingly obsolete aircraft against opponents equipped with superior technology and backed by unlimited industrial production capacity. By 1944, Japanese training programs simply could not replace the quality of aviators lost during 2 years of intensive Pacific combat, creating a downward spiral of declining effectiveness that became irreversible. Production comparisons revealed the hopeless disparity between American and Japanese industrial capacity that made Japanese defeat inevitable regardless of individual courage or tactical skill. While Grumman alone manufactured over 12,000 Hellcats between 1942 and 1945, Japan's entire aircraft industry struggled desperately to produce adequate replacement aircraft for mounting losses while coping with raw material shortages, bombing raids on factories, and the diversion of skilled workers to other military priorities. American carriers routinely operated with full air groups of the most advanced aircraft in the world, while Japanese carriers, when they could still operate at all, launched increasingly desperate raids with partially trained pilots, flying outdated aircraft that had been designed for the tactical requirements of 1940 rather than 1944. The technological gap widened steadily as American industry continued innovating, while Japanese manufacturers struggled merely to maintain existing production levels. The Hellcat's influence on post-war fighter development extended throughout the aviation world. The aircraft's emphasis on pilot survivability, overwhelming firepower, and structural strength became standard features incorporated into subsequent designs by every major aviation manufacturer. The twin-engine jet fighters of the 1950s and 1960s, including the 4 Phantom, 14 Tomcat, and 15 Eagle, incorporated lessons learned directly from Hellcat combat experience, particularly the critical importance of superior firepower and comprehensive pilot protection systems. Strategic bombing of Japanese home islands became feasible after the Marianas Campaign, specifically because Hellcat-equipped carriers could operate close to enemy territory with complete confidence in their defensive capabilities. B-29 superfortresses, flying from Saipan, Tinian, and later bases systematically destroyed Japanese industrial capacity, transportation networks, and urban centers, shortening the war by months or potentially years, while saving hundreds of thousands of American lives that would have been lost in a conventional invasion. The broader implications extended beyond military aviation into fundamental questions about industrial organization, technological development, and the relationship between democratic societies and military effectiveness. American success demonstrated that decentralized innovation, supported by vast industrial capacity and systematic pilot training programs, could overwhelm traditional military systems based on individual excellence and warrior traditions. European observers, particularly in Britain and the Soviet Union, studied American production methods and organizational techniques intensively, recognizing that future military success would depend increasingly on industrial capacity rather than traditional military virtues. The Hellcat represented not just superior aircraft design, but a completely different approach to military production that integrated research, development, manufacturing, and training into comprehensive systems for generating battlefield effectiveness. The F6F Hellcat story reveals the profound transformation that occurs when individual innovation, supported by democratic industrial organization, fundamentally changes the nature of warfare itself. Leroy Grumman's design philosophy, creating aircraft that average pilots could master quickly, maintain easily under combat conditions, and employ effectively against superior numbers, proved decisively superior to alternative approaches that emphasized absolute performance specifications over practical utility and pilot survival. Japanese aviation, despite producing some technically sophisticated aircraft like the Zero and later the formidable Kawanishi N-1K fighter, ultimately could not compete against American systems that integrated aircraft design, mass production, comprehensive pilot training, and advanced logistics into cohesive instruments of military effectiveness. When technical excellence met unlimited industrial capacity and systematic organizational methods, the results were as predictable as they were devastating. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot demonstrated the cumulative effect of superior technology applied through coordinated tactical doctrine developed by democratic institutions. Individual Hellcat pilots achieved remarkable personal success, but their victories resulted from systematic advantages that no amount of individual courage could overcome. Better aircraft, superior training, proven tactics, overwhelming numerical superiority, and the industrial capacity to replace losses faster than the enemy could inflict them. From Leroy Grumman's mortgaged house in Baldwin, Long Island in 1930, to the factory floors of Bethpage producing one aircraft per hour in 1944, the Hellcat represented the complete transformation of American industrial potential into overwhelming battlefield dominance. Company commanders who called their F6Fs the Ace Maker weren't simply describing an aircraft's performance characteristics, they were describing a fundamental revolution in military effectiveness that redefined the relationship between technology, training, and combat success. The Japanese pilots who faced these weapons at the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, the Battle of Leyte Gulf, and dozens of other Pacific engagements fought with traditional military virtues, courage, honor, dedication, and tactical skill against an enemy that had fundamentally redefined the nature of aerial combat through systematic application of industrial democracy. When Lieutenant Alexander Vraciu shot down 6 aircraft in 8 minutes using only 360 rounds of ammunition, he was demonstrating the mathematical precision of American industrial warfare applied to individual combat situations. This was not simply superior marksmanship or exceptional pilot skill, though both were present. This was the result of systematic training programs that produced thousands of competent pilots, aircraft designed for ease of maintenance and operation, ammunition manufactured to precise specifications, and tactics developed through careful analysis of combat reports and continuous refinement based on operational experience. When the last F6F rolled off Grumman's assembly line on November 16, 1945, it marked not just the end of World War II production, but the end of an era when individual pilot skill alone could determine the outcomes of aerial combat engagements. Grumman's revolutionary design philosophy had given American naval aviation the tools to achieve systematic aerial supremacy, creating kill ratios that seemed impossible to earlier generations of military aviation. The Hellcat that stunned Japanese forces across the Pacific represented far more than superior engineering or advanced manufacturing techniques. It embodied the triumph of systematic industrial organization over traditional military methods, of coordinated firepower backed by unlimited production over individual heroism, of technological innovation supported by democratic institutions over established military doctrine based on warrior traditions. In F6F Hellcats, routinely achieving 19-to-1 kill ratios against experienced enemy pilots, Japanese military leaders glimpsed the future of warfare and recognized that their empire faced an opponent that had fundamentally redefined the rules of aerial combat. The mathematical precision of American success was not accidental. It was the inevitable result of democratic societies applying industrial methods to military problems with systematic thoroughness. The shy engineer from Huntington, who mortgaged his house during the depths of the Great Depression, had ultimately created something that transcended individual aircraft design or even military aviation. Leroy Grumman's simple philosophy: build aircraft that pilots can master, maintain under combat conditions, and survive in against determined opposition, had produced the most successful fighter aircraft in naval history and helped secure victory in the largest and most devastating war humanity had ever experienced. His legacy extended far beyond the 12,275 Hellcats that rolled off the Bethpage assembly lines. Grumman had demonstrated that democratic industrial organization, properly applied, could systematically overcome any military challenge through the integration of superior technology, comprehensive training, unlimited production capacity, and tactical innovation based on scientific analysis rather than military tradition. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot was not just an American victory, it was a demonstration that the future belonged to societies that could harness industrial democracy for military purposes.